Hello, welcome back. Today I want to focus on cultivating work ethics in children. Specifically, I want to focus on Jensen Huang's childhood and what lessons we can learn from that. Let's dive in. So, Jensen Huang is a very hardworking man, right? He once said that he is not the smartest, but he can outwork anyone, right? During one interview, he was asked, "How is your work life balance like?" And here's what he says: "When I'm not working, I'm thinking about working. Working relaxes me." Can you imagine? That's what he said. There was also one time when he visited the urinal. And we all know that, well, all the men know that at a urinal, you're not supposed to talk. But he bumped into a colleague and he asked, "Hey, what's up?" And his colleague was like, nothing much. And then Jensen gave his colleague one of this stare. And his colleague was like, "Okay, I'm gonna get fired." So he gave a full status update right there at the urinal to Jensen, and Jensen was satisfied. That was how hardworking Jensen is. But has Jensen always been like this? Was Jensen a lazy child or a hardworking child? I mean, the truth is, he is not only a hardworking man, but an exceptional child labor. I mean, he has been working some real hard job since he was a child, right? Let's dive into that. So Jensen was born in Taiwan in the 60s. His father was a chemical engineer and his mother was a school teacher, right? These were modest jobs and they earned modest wages. But like many parents from that era, especially in East Asia, they had big dreams for their children, right? So when Jensen was 4, his father visited the United States. And he visited it not just anywhere, he was in New York City, right? And he was bedazzled by how the land of opportunity looks like. So he went back home and told his wife, right, "We've got to send Jensen and his brother, who is 1 year older than him, to the United States." However, the reality is, Jensen's father's job required the family to move from one place to another every few years. And for the next few years, they were not in the United States, they were in Thailand. And they were there for several years until a violent political upheaval took place. And that was when Jensen's parents did many parents today would find unthinkable. They separated from Jensen and his brother by sending them to the United States to live with their uncle and aunt. And that was in Oneida, Kentucky. Now, after Jensen arrived at the United States, schooling became a problem because most schools in Oneida did not accept international students. But of course, Jensen's parents would do anything to get their children good education. So they sold all their possessions, their watches, their gold, if they have any, to send Jensen and his brother to what they thought was a prestigious boarding school. It was called Oneida Baptist Institute. And it was not a prestigious boarding school. It was actually a reform school for troubled youth. Now, when I say troubled, I mean some real dark shit, right? So this school was set up over 100 years ago to stop children from killing each other because there were a lot of feuds going on, right? And when Jensen arrived at the school, he realized something was wrong because the school floor was covered in cigarette butts, right? He was like, "Wow, the tobacco industry is really booming here. I wonder if they eat chips." Now, I gotta tell you, if I were Jensen, I probably would have run home crying, but it was Jensen, so he was unfazed, right? He went straight to his dorm room and he was expecting a roommate of his age. But instead, he got someone who was 17, 8 years older than he was. And that guy was covered in 7 stabbing wounds. Yes, Jensen could still see blood coming out of those wounds. And he also learned that that guy got those wounds because he was in a fight. And his opponent was killed. So, yeah, off to a great start of the American dream. So, the school required everyone to engage in physical labor every day. Now, every day they would go to a tobacco farm, and the bigger kids would work on the farm. And Jensen, being small, got the easier job of cleaning the toilets. Haha! Yeah, the easier job. To this day, Jensen reminisced about the impressionist soil art he had to erase and the intoxicating aroma he had to inhale when he was on this easier job. Now, the strange thing is, Jensen actually took great pride in his ability to clean toilets, right? During one interview, he said, "Now, I was probably the best toilet cleaner the Oneida Baptist School has ever had." He even went on to demonstrate his toilet cleaning techniques, right? He was grabbing everything, he was plunging deep, and he was unclogging all sorts of shit, right? Literally, right? He was grabbing, plunging, and unclogging, right? That was his first GPU. And just one last thing about his experience at Oneida Baptist School. He was also beaten up a lot because he was Asian and small. So he had to learn how to weightlift from his roommate. And that actually got him to be more confident and was able to fight back. 2 years later, Jensen's parents were finally able to join them in the United States. So Jensen left all the shit behind, literally, and went to Aloha, Oregon with his parents. And he went to a normal public school. Now, there, he joined a local tennis club and he worked very hard. And his coach thought that he could turn pro. And Jensen was like, "Yeah, although I love my American dollars, I have my dragon blood." Yeah, Jensen was pretty good. He was playing at a national level. Now, later, when he was 15, he worked at a local 24/7 diner called Denny's, right? And there he was also doing all sorts of manual labor, like washing dishes, cleaning toilets, again. He also waited table at some point. But the thing is, for many years, he was working what's called a graveyard shift, which is between midnight to early morning. So those were some of the toughest shifts to work. So that was Jensen's childhood in a nutshell. And I think that an overarching theme is how much manual labor Jensen had to do when he was a child. And I think it has a massive bearing on his work ethics later in life, arguably during teenage year already. What I'm trying to say is child labor is good for the employer, but is brilliant for the child themselves. Now, I'm clearly not talking about depriving children of education or choices or exposing them to hazards that could cripple them, but I am talking about manual labor such as washing dishes, cleaning toilets, mowing the lawns, tidying up the households, all sorts of things. And I think children should just do these things every day, right? And they should just do these things as a matter of household duty or communal duty. They shouldn't be doing these things to, get their allowances or just to help the parents. They should feel it's part of their duty to do some manual labor on a daily basis. Now, I understand many parents these days prefer other things, where they think manual labor is low value and they like flashy things like learning how to program, learning how to invest, doing some arts or getting good grades. But I think if your goal is to build resilience, then all of those things, although they're very good, I think doing manual labor should be the priority. So, resilience is the ability to keep going when the going gets tough. And I think physical labor, manual labor, is better at building resilience because it is objectively harder than mental challenges, right? Think about it. If being a janitor, a road worker, or a construction worker pays the same as your current hourly wage, like, would you prefer to do those jobs instead of your current job? I think not, right? Because you don't like the physical pain and discomfort, right? You like sitting behind a desk and rearranging letters or logos on your computer to earn money. Now, I am a corporate lawyer, and sometimes I work past midnight, right? But there's no chance that I would be able to keep cleaning toilets past midnight because I would probably die before then. So, when children are used to the hardship of physical labor, mental challenges just become, less challenging. Is not really that big of a mystery. And as a bonus point, children's brain actually become more adaptable when they are doing physical activities, as opposed to reading or doing things on a screen. And this is well documented in John Medina's book Brain Rules, and feel free to check it out if you would like to. Now, say now you agree that manual labor is better. Now, how do you get your children to do it, right? Won't your children just get frustrated and throw all your cabbages on the floor and make a mess everywhere? So I think we can learn a lot from Jensen's example, right? So think about it. He pretty much realized what Oneida Baptist School was like on day one. Now, why didn't he just run home crying? Now, why did he persist at doing the kind of physical labor that seemed harsh, even judging by the standard of the 70s? Right? He was only 9. It was really, a bit like a miracle. But I think it was probably not really a miracle because most of his classmates persisted, right? I think he persisted because he was in a community which valued hard work, right? The school uses physical labor to teach valuable things like hard work and collaboration. So I think he was heavily influenced by the community he was in. I'll also think that his parents were very hardworking people. So he might have modeled work ethics by looking at his parents. So, in short, he got into hard work through peer pressure, I mean, community value, and parents modeling, right? Now, still, we can't all send our children to reform schools to clean toilets. So, how do we do this in practice? Now, in my household, we believe that children should shoulder household responsibilities that they can handle, and they should be rewarded with only the pride of having served the household and nothing more, right? Meaning no allowances, no gifts for the work that they have done, just the pride, right? So now my daughter is regularly helping me to crack open a dozen eggs for making omelets. He also helps me with loading and unloading dishwashers. Now, of course, there was some mess, right? Like my floor has tasted many raw eggs and stale bolognese, but I would say that her accuracy reached probably over 90% after 2 to 3 sessions. So it wasn't really that bad. Now, we have a simple 3-step approach to getting our daughter to do household chores as a duty. Now, step 1 is model but not interfere, right? So, children are fascinated by house chores anyway, so it wasn't too difficult to get them to start trying something. Usually that's the case. But as they are trying it, especially during the initial stage, it is very important not to interfere, right? Any instruction, any correction at this stage can derail their interest. Take egg cracking as an example. When my daughter was first doing it, she would just pick up an egg and just crack it anywhere she likes, and the egg juice would go everywhere, right? If I stopped her right there and just say, no, 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 that's not how you do it, and I just took over, or I said you were doing it wrong, I think she probably would have lost interest very quickly. So instead of telling her that she was doing wrong and taking the egg away from her, what I did is basically just to get very close to her, standing next to her, And then I get myself a box of eggs and I started cracking eggs into the bowl, basically the way that I would normally do it, but more slowly so that she could see it, right? And when I was doing that, I would also say to myself, okay, so I pick up an egg and I need to crack it on the edge of a bowl so that it's open, and I would basically open it like this, and that's how the egg yolk and egg white would fall into the bowl. I kind of just narrate what I was doing now in a very clear and slow pace. And I think that got her to focus on the way I did it. And children love to model you. Children love to model you. So if you model the right behavior for them, it actually works a lot better than telling them what to do. But what if modeling does not work and the children were just doing whatever they like and they were not even doing the tasks right? They were not focusing. They were like throwing stuff all over the place, making a mess. I say there's nothing wrong with letting them to have a little bit of freedom. But yes, I do understand that we all have limited time and we do want to get things done. So give them a little bit of space, maybe 5 minutes or so, to kind of just wander about, do whatever they like. And then you can do step two, which is ask for help and stop the sabotage. Okay? So, what I mean by that is instead of telling them what to do, correcting them, ask for help, right? So you can see, like, again, take the egg cracking as an example. If my daughter is not focusing on cracking eggs, I will say to her, ah, um, darling, we really need these eggs in a bowl because we need to make breakfast, right? Can you please help daddy, crack those eggs into the bowl so that I can make omelet, right? So basically, I was treating my daughter like my helper, like my, part of my team. And instead of instructing her or teaching her what to do, I'm asking for help. You know, I'm giving them a sense of power because I think at the end of the day, it feels good to help other people, partly because you feel like you are having some form of influence. It's an empowering feeling. And I think it works on children too. It makes the children feel good when you ask them for their help. Now, of course, that can deal with the situation when the children are just not really focused on the task. But if the children are doing something that is damaging and that's something that you would not want to see in the long run, then you do need to tell her that doing certain things has negative consequences. And that's what I mean by stopping the sabotage. So let's say my daughter is basically just throwing eggs on the floor continuously, right? Then what I would often do is to basically look at those eggs and I would make a very sad face. I would just go, oh, it was such a pity. Those eggs. I was so looking forward to eat them, and now I can't. It was so sad. Now, basically, the idea is to dramatize the consequence of a certain action, right? Instead of criticizing your daughter or basically saying that she did something wrong, show her what the consequences are, but in a more visible and dramatic way. You can kind of think of yourself as, Oliver Twist, for example, right? If Oliver Twist had some eggs to make omelets, and those eggs had just got smashed on the floor by somebody, how would he feel? It was basically his only chance to have a full stomach that day. How will he feel if his eggs are now completely ruined? right? That is the kind of energy that you can channel to show your children the consequences of wasting food. Now, after step two, hopefully your children will do what you want them to do and actually make some concrete contribution to a household chore. Then we can move on to step three, which is to say thanks and name your children's contribution. Now, in terms of helping children to cultivate an interest in doing house chores, I think gratitude is a lot more powerful than compliments, right? Because when you are giving compliments to your children, the focus is on your approval of the children. Whereas if you are saying thanks to your children and tell them how they made your life easier, the focus is on how the children have helped you. And that gives them a more powerful positive feeling because it is a sense of purpose. Now, basically, purpose is defined as something that goes beyond oneself, a goal that goes beyond oneself, right? So, helping your children to feel the gratitude from you give them a sense of purpose, which is why that feeling is so much more powerful than just saying, "Oh, what a good girl." The second part about telling your children exactly how they contributed to the household chore is also very important because it makes them understand that these specific things that they're doing is helpful to you, right? It will make them want to do it again and probably think about other ways that they can help you. Now, I have the goal of basically, making my children aspire to not just crack eggs, but actually make an omelette. I'm hoping that my daughter will learn how to do it before she turns 5. So there you have it, right? Get your children to do household chores as a duty to the household, right? They will become resilient because a lot of the mental challenges they later encounter will seem like a piece of cake, right? Then you can just wait for 3 decades and boom, they will just invent the chips for quantum computer and you can be the father and mother of the billionaire. Now, of course. Well, thank you for tuning in. It was a pleasure sharing Jensen's story with you and let's talk about another billionaire next time.